Just as a little gift to you people shivering in the Northern Hemisphere winter, I'm going to show some nice video from our Southern Hemisphere summer down here in New Zealand, while I talk about Almafarag's great video on Morris Berman. I was really struck by the wonderfully rich propositions you concluded with, Mark. The self is a process that exists in its antagonisms. I think I can find this in things as mundane as, say, the friction of a stone in my shoe, which brings my foot into awareness, or an ache in my tooth, which brings my tooth into awareness, or the loss of my freedom, which brings freedom into awareness. It is death that brings life into awareness. That is certainly the experience of those who have a terminal diagnosis, so much so that it's almost a cliche. But since life itself is a terminal illness, we begin to see why an awareness of one's death has always been valued by lovers of wisdom. Socrates speculated in a similar vein in the Phaedo, when the shackles were taken off his legs on the day of execution, and he marvelled how the removal of their pain was a pleasure, that one could not go without the other. Without pleasure he would not know pain, and without pain he would not know pleasure. It's the yin and the yang of everything giving rise to its opposite. Until the antagonism, then foot, tooth, freedom, life are all just taken for granted, unnoticed. Without the antagonism, the friction, our attention is not engaged. This is structured into life itself. In the animal kingdom, it's the final survival strategy. Freeze before the predator strikes, and you may disappear to the predator. Our senses are evolved to detect not states, but changes in state. When applying these ideas to the self, this resonates with the notion that these antagonisms are given wings in language, to use my favourite Homeric formula. This is how I unconsciously form the narrations with which I define and maintain myself. Would I even need language, let alone have precipitated out of the flurry of sensory data an entity called myself, if I were not driven by opposition, antagonism, to imagine and narrate myself counterposed to that? It makes me ask, does everything have its roots in its opposite? Without hot, no cold. Without cold, no hot. Without death, no life. Without life, no death. Without heaven, no earth. Without earth, no heaven. What can we learn by looking at the nature of these dualistic pairs locked always in a mutually constituting relationship? It might be an improvement on our current tendency, that is to identify with one and deny the other. As an example of this, just look at YouTube's current unending, futile and severely wrong-headed theist-atheist wars. Are these and many more of the problems we seem to get into because of a fundamentally incomplete dualistic way of looking at them? Do we need to attack this dualistic habit of thought? In fact, can we even go one step further and think that when we do get ourselves locked into these interminable circles, we have to find out what is the dualistic lock that's tying us there and step beyond it? Mark, you mentioned Berman's statement that ideologies arise in the absence of somatic inquiry. This is experiencing our life sensually. I would of course add the sixth sense, sensing the mind contents to that. Ideologies are ideas that enslave us without us even being aware of them. They bind us in a language that narrates ourselves into being. But in the embodied lives that are in direct response to our senses and to the world, freedom from this arises. And as the life becomes more embodied, the antagonisms reduce, so the self recedes. We become freed from the ego's exhausting and futile survival strategies to be less national, more global, less individual, more collective, less competitive, more cooperative, less exploitative, more ecological. This is very Buddhist, very Taoist, very Lao Tzu, very Gautama, and very Morris Berman.